The UFC returns to China this upcoming weekend for the second time in 3 months, and this time it will take place in Shanghai with a main event that is absolutely pivotal right now for the bantamweight division, as we will see the former title challenger and current number 3 ranked 135er in the world, Umar Nurmagomedov, taking on China's hometown kid and number 6 ranked Song Yadong. And in the co-main event, we're going to see another former title challenger and number 4 ranked women's strawweight, hailing from China, Yan Xiaonan, returning to action for the first time in 16 months, and she will be putting her name value and ranking on the line against someone 10 spots down in the ranks in the number 14, Denise Gomes, who with the win on Saturday would absolutely launch herself not only into the top 10, but potentially into the top 5 and maybe one win away from a title shot at strawweight. So let's dig a little deeper into these matchups and the stakes surrounding them and their divisions right now. And so obviously this main event is important for the bantamweight division between Umar and Song, not only because it's number 3 versus number 6, but because it will be happening less than 2 months out from when the championship in this division will be getting defended for the first time this year, when Petr Yan and Merab Dvalishvili will have their trilogy match at UFC 333 on October 24th in Abu Dhabi. So the result of this matchup is going to be very fresh of mind by the time that trilogy match rolls around, and the winner will absolutely be in talks to be the number 1 contender in this division, not to mention both of them have history with the other 2 names in that championship match. For Umar, his only loss ever in the UFC and in his career came against Merab Dvalishvili when he challenged him for the title back at UFC 311 in January, where they would go the full 25 minutes and Umar would give Merab the toughest test to date during his win streak up until losing to Yan, but ultimately would fall short and Merab would carry on his insane 2025 run. And for Song Yadong, he has history with the now champion Petr Yan, as he lost to him back at UFC 299 in March of 2024, but if he wins here against Umar, he will have won 3 out of 4 since then and can be right there knocking on the door for a rematch, assuming of course that Yan remains the champion. And then obviously with both of them having history, they both have fresh matchups as well, because Umar Nurmagomedov has yet to face Petr Yan, which would be an insanely high level mixed martial arts contest, and Song Yadong has yet to face Merab Dvalishvili, which is an extremely intriguing bout in itself. For Umar, he is now 30 years old, right now in the midst of his prime with a 20-1 record overall, and since his title fight loss to Merab, he has fought twice, both of them being victories. A decision win over Mario Bautista that came last October, and then a decision win this year in January against Davison Figueiredo, the former great down at flyweight. And of course, we can't forget that he also has a victory over another former title challenger in Corey Sandhagen. That is what would earn him the crack at Merab's throne. And a win and finish that seems to be aging like a fine wine on Umar's resume is actually against Raoni Barcelos, when he finished him with a body kick back in January of 2023, because now he's main eventing at the end of September against Raul Rosas Jr., and he is currently on a 5-fight win streak and in the top 15, even though he's pushing 40. It's obvious how elite Umar Nurmagomedov is. We aren't naive to the fact that he is with the Team Khabib camp with Islam Makhachev and his brother Usman, who is probably going to make his debut in the UFC, and fingers crossed before the end of 2026. He has all of the tools to become a champion in this bantamweight division. He is well versed, he is well rounded, and he can get the job done in all facets of MMA, because he obviously has the grappling and wrestling to fall back on, but like his brother Usman, is very precise and technical when it comes to the stand-up realm. And so no matter who Umar gets paired up with, it always feels as though he will be the betting odds-on favorite to win. And that is no different here in this matchup with Song Yadong, as he is currently listed as a minus 500 favorite. But the Kung Fu Kid Song Yadong, in his home territory of China, fighting in front of his home crowd, is going to be extremely motivated to pull off the upset, obviously because he's in the main event, he's on the marquee, he's on the poster, but because with the win here against Umar Nurmagomedov, he might finally get his crack at gold that he has been waiting for years, even though he is still only 28 years of age. Because we can't forget that he made his UFC debut way back in November of 2017, nearly 9 years ago, when he was 1 week away from turning 20. And so while on paper Umar Nurmagomedov is the much more high-level mixed martial artist when it comes to complete skill sets, his resume doesn't even sniff what Song Yadong has faced over the past near decade. with fights against Marlon Vera, Kyler Phillips, Marlon Moraes, Corey Sandhagen, Ricky Simone, Chris Gutierrez, Peter Yan, Henry Cejudo, Sean O'Malley, and Davison Figueiredo. He has fought the who's who of bantamweight, and so with a win here and an upset at that, against a big name and high profile opponent such as Umar, it would be hard to deny Song Yadong of his first ever title opportunity. However, it is worth mentioning that aforementioned name of Sean O'Malley, who is a former champion, and much like Umar Nurmagomedov, has won back-to-back fights since losing to Merab Dvalishvili in a title fight. And that first one, of course, was against Song Yadong, so he has a big upper hand and advantage here, obviously, if Yadong can come out the victor on Saturday against Umar. And the second win for Sean was a knockout on the White House card against Ayman Zahabi, who was on a massive win streak heading into that June bout. And of course, it helps Sean O'Malley that he is the Sugar Show, and he is one of, if not the biggest stars in the UFC right now, especially out of the United States. And it feels like right now his brand is being built bigger than it has ever been before, even when he was the champion. And so there is a lot of momentum there. It's just the fact that it was a couple months ago now, and I don't think he has an issue waiting out what happens in October between Yan and Merab. Now, to be quite frank with you, the fight that should have happened in June, in my opinion, should have been Sean O'Malley versus Umar Nurmagomedov, and then it would have been a solidified #1 contender bout, hands down, bar none. But that is unfortunately not what the UFC decided to go with, and so now we kind of have a three-headed monster here in terms of who can be the next #1 contender after that trilogy concludes in October. And as I mentioned earlier, obviously Umar is extremely well versed in all facets of the mixed martial arts game, but he is going to want to grapple. He is going to want to wrestle here if he wants to find the most successful path to victory here against Song Yadong. Because at the end of the day, Umar does average over 4 takedowns per 15 minutes. But historically, throughout all of the bouts that Song Yadong has competed in, does hold a pretty respectable 73% takedown defense, but I just don't know if that's going to be enough here in this one. But if it can be enough to keep the fight standing, that is where things will get interesting, because Song Yadong is the type of fighter that can bring the pressure and bring the pace, and that is something that not really anyone's been able to do to Umar outside of course, Merab Dvalishvili. So don't get me wrong, this is a big uphill battle for the hometown favorite in Song Yadong here, but it is also a massive opportunity, and we are going to get to see if he can rise to the occasion more so than he has ever done in the past. He's already 1-0 this year in China when he beat Davison Figueiredo, and if he can go 2-0 on the year in his home country, it may just be enough to earn him a title shot. So I'm going to get your thoughts on this matchup down in the comments below and your predictions. Will Umar Nurmagomedov win his 3rd consecutive bout and make himself nearly undeniable for a second crack at gold? Or can Song Yadong pull off the upset in front of his Chinese home crowd and after close to 10 years in the UFC, get his first crack at gold? Sound off down in the comments below. And next we will discuss that strawweight co-main event as the #4 ranked Yan Xiaonan is returning for the first time in 16 months and as a matter of fact has only competed twice since her April 2024 title fight loss to fellow Chinese woman Zhang Weili. One was a victory in November of that year against Tabitha Ricci, and the other was the fight last April where she lost to Virna Jandiroba, who would go on to fight for the vacant belt in October. So as Yan Xiaonan will enter off of a massive layoff and having lost 2 of her last 3, the 14th ranked opponent of her in the blue corner, Denise Gomes, will enter riding a ton of momentum, a 4-fight win streak, having not tasted defeat since her loss to Angela Hill in November of 2023. With 2 fights in 2024 and 2 fights in 2025, she is remaining active, and although this is her first fight in 2026, it is a massive opportunity for her to break in and have a statement victory for the first time. Gomes is already 6-2 in the UFC and still just 26 years of age, with a 12-3 record overall and 7 knockout victories to her name. She is definitely one of those young up-and-coming fighters in the strawweight division to watch out for, but the problem is there are other women that have made splashes more recently, such as Fatima Klein and Alexia Tainara. But with a win here for Gomes on Saturday, she would have the biggest win of all 3 of them and potentially earn the highest ranking out of the 3 as well. If she can do it in convincing enough fashion against the former title challenger in Yan Xiaonan, she could be in the top 5 and maybe even snatch the #4 ranking away. And so really right now in August of 2026, the strawweight division has a lot of momentum finally, with those aforementioned names like Klein and Alexia Tainara getting wins this year, with the strawweight championship just getting defended by Mackenzie Dern successfully when she defeated Jillian Robertson, and now here this one, #4 versus #14, and hopefully a couple of more ranked matchups before the end of 2026. Things are in a good spot right now, and that's not even including the potential return of the aforementioned former champion Zhang Weili. So for Yan Xiaonan, this is a break or make moment for her. At 37 years old, long layoff, not a lot of momentum on her side. If she wants any chance to remain in title contention and maybe fight for a title one more time before she retires, she must win here against Denise Gomes in front of her home Chinese crowd. Now, of course, in similar fashion to that main event where Song Yadong had much more high-level competition than his opponent Umar, the same can be said here for Yan when compared to her opponent Gomes, as she has fought Angela Hill, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Claudia Gadelha, Carla Esparza, Marina Rodriguez, Mackenzie Dern, Jessica Andrade, Zhang Weili, Tabitha Ricci, and Virna Jandiroba. Those are all massive names, tons of them being former champions or title challengers. So it's just going to be a matter of if the game has passed Yan Xiaonan by and if the new wave, the new generation of fighter in Denise Gomes is ready to take that spotlight from her. Because as I've already alluded to, that seems to kind of be the trend right now for 115 pounds with Fatima Klein and Alexia Tainara rising the ranks quickly. Because I do think it is worth mentioning that previous name in Mackenzie Dern, because not only has Yan Xiaonan fought her before, but she actually defeated her. And that was back in October of 2022, so there is a bit of history there, which is good for Yan Xiaonan if she's wanting to build toward a title shot with the champ in Dern, who maybe wants to get a loss erased from her memory. Now, I'm not saying that if Yan Xiaonan beats a number 14 ranked fighter that she's going to get Mackenzie Dern next, but I do think she could place herself in a position where she would only need one more victory, and then it could be enough to get a title shot, especially if Dern can remain the champion because of their history. And for Gomes, if she can beat Yan Xiaonan and catapult herself near the top 5 or maybe even into with a 5-fight win streak, she will also, in my opinion, be just one win away from a title shot. But for her, there are a lot more fresh options at the top of the bill because of her lack of experience when compared to Yan. So she could welcome back Zhang Weili, she could fight Tatiana Suarez, she could fight Jillian Robertson, who just lost in a title fight, or she could even face Virna Jandiroba, who is a former title challenger. Any of those names can be next for Denise, and if she beats any one of them, in my opinion, that would be 6 wins in a row, and that is plenty to earn a title shot. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on this matchup, what your predictions could be, and if the long layoff and lack of momentum for Yan Xiaonan is going to be the determining factor on whether or not she gets a victory here in front of her Chinese home crowd. And for Denise Gomes, at 26 years of age, not even in her prime yet, do you think she has the right skill set to get this victory and maybe challenge for a title in her future, and dare I say, even become a strawweight champion? I want to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. And although those are the top 2 bouts on the card that are going to get the most amount of eyeballs and talk around them, there is one more ranked matchup on this card, and it is actually a rematch from the fight that happened in China back in May in Macau between Alex Perez and Sumudaerji. Because if you remember, that fight would have to be stopped early on due to an accidental groin kick that would result in a no contest during the second round. Because we can't forget that Alex Perez is currently sitting at number 11 in the flyweight division and is a former title challenger, having fought the who's who at 125 pounds for years at this point, and was entering that fight in May off of a knockout against Charles Johnson. And that knockout win for Alex Perez at the beginning of the year against the 15th ranked flyweight was a massive bounce back for him, because entering that fight, he had lost 5 of his last 6 and was maybe on the chopping block. So while it is unfortunate that his fight against Sumudaerji had to be halted and resulted in a no contest, he at least gets the opportunity to maybe right the ship here and extend his win streak to 2 in a row. And prior to that no contest in May, Sumudaerji was on a 3-fight win streak, which in his own right was huge for his career, because he was before that on a 3-fight skid that even included a loss to Charles Johnson. Obviously, Emma math doesn't always work out, but it's at least worth mentioning. Sumudaerji is always in scraps, back and forth battles, but I think the problem for him in reaching the next echelon in the flyweight division has been his lack of finishes, at least as of late, because historically over his 19 victories, he does have 14 finishes. However, he hasn't had a finish in the UFC since November of 2020, and that's actually the only time he's ever gotten a finish. But if he can get that no contest out of the way and get a clear, clean victory against Alex Perez, who is a former title challenger, that will unquestionably be the biggest win of Sumudaerji's career. And at 30 years old, still right now in his prime, he has plenty of time left to climb the ranks at flyweight and prove that he can finally put his game and skills all together to make a run. And right now, the flyweight division from top to bottom is the best that it has ever been, hands down, bar none. And so he would just be another fun addition to the absolutely loaded top 15. And as as for the rest of the card, there are a couple of names and fights that I do want to mention. One is Kaya Sakura, who is back in action for his second bantamweight fight in the UFC, taking on Arichi Lang. Asakura obviously was granted a title opportunity in his UFC debut in December of 2024, where he would fall short via submission to Alexandre Pantoja, and then he would actually lose his second outing at flyweight when he would be defeated by former title challenger Tim Elliott. And so it looked as though his career in the UFC, at least in the flyweight division, was dead in its tracks. But then back in May in Macau, China, he was able to move up to bantamweight and get an absolutely nasty knockout against Cameron Smotherman, and now he has the chance to go 2-0 at 135. The 25-year-old undefeated Bilal Hassan is making his UFC debut, and I am mentioning this because he literally just fought on week 1 of Dana White's Contender Series Season 10 on August 11th, and now just a little under 3 weeks later, he's making his debut, flying all the way across the world to China and taking on an undefeated fellow UFC debutant who is 9-0, and that is Nilson Rojas, who has 7 of his 9 wins coming by way of knockout. This can be an absolute banger. So that is it for the UFC Shanghai preview and breakdown, and now I want to get your thoughts and your predictions on this entire card down in the comments below. What fights are you looking forward to the most? What storylines are you looking forward to playing out? And everything else in between, maybe even some of your bets. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new, because every single week I am breaking down and previewing the biggest and best fights and storylines heading into each card. In the aftermath, I recap the most meaningful results, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can also join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as like the Facebook page Verbal Sparring MMA, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great weekend, enjoy the fights, and I will see you all in the next video.